This is University English 2, The Skills, and we are up now to Unit 9, Give Me a Ring. And this is all about making and answering telephone calls in both personal and professional contexts. We'll begin with an introduction, and then we'll look at making personal calls. And then we'll start looking at more professional calls, answering professional calls and making professional calls. We'll take a look at a few tips to improve our listening ability on the phone, and then we'll be looking at troubleshooting problems with phone calls. And then finally, we'll be ending our calls, followed by a summary. Fran Lebowitz, as cited in Of Wit and Humour in 2015, said, "The telephone is a good way to talk to people without having to offer them a drink." Now, the word telephone itself comes from Greek, with tele meaning distant or far away, and phone meaning sound. Commonly, the word telephone is shortened to simply phone. Now, with improved technology, wireless devices are now common and are typically called mobiles in the United Kingdom or cell phones in the United States. Sometimes they are also called smartphones as well. Landlines remains the common term used for devices that still use wireless connections. So those which do not use wireless connections, we often refer to as a landline. Now, remember that telephone communication is going to be more difficult than face-to-face communication because you are lacking the aspect of body language. That means that the words which you use and the way you say those words becomes more important. Now, the advent of video calls and conferencing technology has improved on this situation a little bit, though do bear in mind that typically still only the face or the upper body can be seen in these kinds of video calls. Now, adding to these natural difficulties with a telephone call, both voice and video calls also suffer from noise. Now, in this context, noise is anything which actually interferes with the communication in some way. So if you have a poor connection, that's noise. If there is background music playing, that's clearly going to be noise. But anything interfering with your communication can be considered to be noise. Now, despite the rise in the use of applications which use text-based messages, voice communications are a very, very commonplace occurrences. And perhaps the reason for this is because telephone calls are more personal than text-based messaging. And also they allow for faster communication and faster interaction. And also it's easier to understand what people mean when they are talking than when they are simply writing, which then also lacks the aspect of voice as well. So it's easier to understand, faster and more personal. Now, in today's world, you can actually expect to use voice communications quite frequently in both your personal life and your academic life, and in the working world in professional contexts as well. Now, bear in mind that the person who is being called will be the one to answer a call and will therefore be the first person to speak in a telephone conversation. If your own personal phone is being called and you don't know who the caller is, then you can use a short, simple greeting. Note that hello is slightly more polite than hi, so it's perhaps more appropriate for unknown callers to personal phones. So if someone is calling your personal phone and you don't know who it is, perhaps the best word to use would be hello. On many devices like smartphones, the identity of the caller might be known because there are functions on the phone such as caller ID or caller identity. Now, typically, if telephone numbers have been saved, then you will see who the caller is. And this would be the case with perhaps work colleagues where you save the number, acquaintances, friends, and also family members. Now, in these cases, depending on the person calling, you might use hi if it's a friend or family member, or maybe hello if you want to be a little bit more formal, alongside the name of the person who is calling. So if your friend Bob calls you, then you might just say, hi, Bob, when you answer the phone. Now, if the person you're speaking to is a friend or a family member, less formal language might be used by all the participants in the telephone call. But if you're speaking in a more professional context, particularly if it's a work phone, and work phones are still usually landlines, by the way, and many of these will not show the caller's details, often because you get many callers and you don't have all of those details possibly saved. So you might not know who the caller is when they call you on a work phone, which will likely be a landline. And in these cases, you want to try to use more formal and more polite language. Now, the most common professional way of answering a phone is to give a greeting of some kind, followed by your company's name, and you can also include the company department, and then your own name. And this is kind of a standard. A greeting, and then a company name and all the department, and then your own name. Now, here are some polite, when we're talking about more formal expressions, which someone answering the phone might use for a variety of different situations. So to greet the caller, so this will be the first thing that you say. So if it's the morning, you may say, good morning, Samsung sales department. This is Delia Clark. So you can see there, greeting, and then in this case, Samsung is the company, and they're just simply saying the department, so Samsung sales department, and then the name. This is Delia Clark. As an alternative, it might be in the afternoon, in which case you can say, good afternoon, Halls Medical Center, Simon speaking. And notice often is will be omitted or deleted. So you might just say Simon speaking rather than Simon is speaking, which you can say as well, but Simon speaking would be absolutely fine too. But once again, the same format for the initial answering of the call here for professional calls. You have a greeting followed by the company or the department as well, and then your name. Now, often the next thing that you need to do is to ask the caller why they are calling you. When somebody calls you, they typically have a reason for calling you. So usually the next line will simply be, how can I help you? Or perhaps, how may I help you today? And these would be put together. So it would be, for example, good afternoon, Halls Medical Center, Simon speaking, how can I help you? And that would be then forming the entire greeting. Now, there are situations where you might need to ask who is calling, in which case you could say, may I ask who's calling, please? Or can I get your name, please? Notice that we're using modal verbs quite a lot here, and we may also use embedding to make these questions more polite. So instead of just saying, who's calling? We are saying, may I ask, and then embedding it, who's calling, adding the magic word, please. Now you might want to ask, who the caller actually wants to speak to, because maybe they don't want to speak to you. And here are a couple of polite ways you can do that. Who would you like to speak with, for example? Using would like here instead of want. So remember, try to be polite. These are semi-formal bordering on formal situations here. So who would you like to speak with rather than who do you want to speak with? May I ask who you are looking for? So instead of saying, who are you looking for? Then let's embed it. May I ask who you are looking for? Now, if you're a little bit busy at the moment, as we all sometimes are at work, then you want to apologize to the caller. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can just simply say, I'm sorry, or you can say, I'm afraid, and then continue the expression after I'm afraid. I'm afraid, in the context of the example here, means that the same as I'm sorry, rather than I'm scared. So in the first example, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Could you call me back? And in the second example, I'm afraid I'm tied up right now. Can I call you back tomorrow? Now, tied up in this context is an idiomatic expression. It means I'm busy. Now, if the person they want to speak to is busy, then you can again apologize and try to indicate that they're not available at the moment, and perhaps indicate that they're busy. So as examples here, I'm afraid he's not available at the moment, or I'm sorry, but she's tied up right now. Now, in many of these situations, especially when you're asking who they want to speak to and that person is unavailable, then you want to try to take a message. The caller might actually ask to leave a message. They might say, can I leave a message? In which case you can then take the message down. But you can also ask if they want to leave a message by simply saying, can I take a message? Or would you like me to pass on a message? Now, the person who is calling will always have a reason, a specific reason for making the call, at least in a professional context. In a personal context, of course, you can just call somebody to chat, to talk for a little bit, because you want to talk to them. But in the working world or in university life, there is going to be a reason why you're actually making the call. So here are some polite expressions if you, as a caller, want to indicate or tell the person you're calling why you're actually calling. For example, if you want to ask for information, you might say something like, I would like to ask about my grade for the physics class. Or, can I inquire about your new product line? Now, if you're calling to give information, you might say things like, I'm calling to inform you that the meeting has been cancelled. Or, I'm just calling to let you know that your book has been accepted. Now, if you want to simply ask for something, then you can use an expression like, could you please send me your homework? Or, would you mind forwarding the assignment to me? If you wish to confirm something, then you might use expressions like, I would like to confirm my reservation on flight LX452 to London. Could I just confirm if you will be attending tomorrow's luncheon? Now, if you want to make, cancel, or reschedule appointments, then you want to be polite as well. In all of these cases, people have given their time for you. So to make an appointment, you might actually say something like, I would like to make an appointment to see Dr. Harris, please. Or, could I book a table for dinner next Friday? Now, if you're going to cancel an appointment, you need to apologize. So, I'm afraid an urgent matter came up and I can't make lunch. Or, I'm terribly sorry, but I won't be able to attend the meeting. If you want to cancel and then reschedule an appointment, then use the word reschedule. So I would like to reschedule my appointment with Dr. Harris, please. Could we reschedule our meeting tomorrow? When is good for you? Now, in relation to invitations, you might wish to give an invitation, or you might wish to accept an invitation, or you might wish to decline an invitation, to say no to an invitation. So here are some polite ways you could give an invitation. We would like to invite you to our exhibition next week. Or, I was wondering if you could come to the opening night tomorrow. To accept an invitation, thank you so much for the invitation. I would love to come. Or, that would be great. I'd be delighted to go to the movies with you. To say no, to decline an invitation, you want to give a reason why you are declining the invitation, a good reason. You don't want to make them feel that you don't want to be there for any reason other than that you're busy in some way. So, for example, I would love to come, but I'm afraid I'll be out of town. Or, I really appreciate the invitation, but I have an appointment. So remember to be polite. Now, when you're on a voice call, you will not have the advantage of body language unless it's a video call. And even then, there are going to be some considerable limitations. So the other person's voice is really important. It's paramount for your understanding of the communication. Now, to improve your performance, there are a few things that you can do. The first is to limit your talking. Remember that conversation involves more than one person. So do give the other person time to speak. Also, don't interrupt. It's rude to talk over somebody else at the same time as they're talking. Wait for an appropriate pause instead of interrupting somebody who's speaking. And then also you want to concentrate. Remember that the person's words and the way those words are being said, their use of voice, are all you have to understand this message. So try to focus on what is being said. Also, listen for ideas, not just for words. If you panic when you hear a word that you don't understand, you'll lose the bigger picture. So instead, try to focus on the general meaning. Don't get stuck on one word and panic when you hear a word that you don't understand. Remember to use interjections. So interjections will help to show that you are listening and that you are interested. You can simply say, yes, I see, or even sounds like, aha, at appropriate times to show the other person that you are listening. Restrict noise. So a poor connection, if you're chewing gum even, that can be noise. Music in the background, try to move somewhere where it's quieter, for example. Try to restrict anything that can interfere with your telephone conversation. And then finally, take notes. And this is quite important, especially if it's a work phone. You want to be writing down everything that is being said, because these are important messages. You might be taking a message for somebody else, in which case you should write down the message, or they might be giving you information. Write down the information that you are being given. You will forget things later on, so do have a pen and paper handy to take some notes, and then confirm the accuracy of your notes before you end the call. Now, when you're calling and when you are answering the phone, there are some situations which may arise that can cause problems. So here are some ways that you can deal with or resolve those problems. Now, if somebody says something and you don't understand what they've said, you can ask them to say it again. Ask someone to repeat something. And here are a couple of expressions that you can use. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. And this is an idiomatic expression, meaning I didn't understand. Could you say that again, please? I'm afraid I couldn't follow you. Another idiomatic expression, meaning I don't understand. Could you repeat that, please? So ask them to say it again. They'll, I'm sure, have no problem to say it again. Now, you might also need to ask someone to spell a word for you. Remember that you're likely writing things down, hopefully writing things down, in which case you might want to get the spelling right. So you ask them, would you mind spelling your name for me, please? Or what's the spelling of Johan, please? Now, sometimes you might call a wrong number, or somebody might call you by mistake, in which case there are some simple ways you can deal with that. If you are the caller, then you might say, I'm sorry to bother you, I called the wrong number. And if you're the receiver, you might say, I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. Now, towards the end of the call, any received information, once again, should be confirmed so that there are no errors. Making a written note of the details is very advisable. If you are on a cell phone or a mobile phone, then ask the other person's permission first to make a recording explaining that you will do it so that you can remember the information. Then either person can actually initiate or start the end of the call. Don't forget your manners. Don't forget to say thank you for their time and their help. And don't forget to say bye at the end. So how can you confirm information? Here are a couple of ways. You can just say, can I just confirm? So we are meeting at the brick house at 5 p.m. Or do you mind if I repeat that back to you just to confirm? To end the call, it might be a simple exchange where person A says, I will pass the message on to Brian. And then person B, thanks. Bye then. And person A would say, bye. Now, never hang up a call without saying goodbye. It's quite important. Native English speakers consider it quite rude if you just hang up without that final goodbye. So thanks, bye then, bye. Both people saying goodbye. Let's summarize. Telephone calls are frequently made in both your professional and your personal lives. Simple methods of answering a personal call, such as hello, are used. And the discussion can then continue using informal language with your friend or your family member about any possible number of topics. Professionally, though, when you are answering the call, you should use greeting, good morning, good afternoon, and then the company, some strong company, and then your name, Jake speaking. And this would typically be followed by an expression such as, how can I help you? Because you will know that the person is calling you for a reason, so let's get that reason straight away. Now, if you're the caller, this will be your opportunity then to state your reason. Why are you calling? State it clearly and state it politely as well. Both participants should listen carefully to what is being said, avoid any noise, and make notes of any information being exchanged, particularly messages which are being taken for other people. Conclude the call politely. Don't forget to say thank you, and don't forget to say bye at the end. And that concludes our lecture on how to make and how to answer telephone calls in both personal and, more importantly, professional contexts. Thanks again for your attention, and I'll see you next time.